Hare Krishna, somebody can please lead the invocation prayers.
Prabhuji, may I do that one?
Go ahead, Prabhu.
Om Anyana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Sri Guruve Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manobhistam Sthapitam Yena Bhutali Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantika Vande Ham Sri Guru Sri Yutapata Kamalam Sri Guru Vaishnav Cha Sri Rupam Sagaradam Sahagana Raghunathan Tam Pitam Santam Sa Jivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Sri Visakan Vitam Cha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpati Gopesa Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostude Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Risabhanu Sutta Devi Pranamami Haripriye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhaya Ivacha Patitanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnaverbhyo Namo Namah Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Sri Vasadi Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Om Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Bhagavate Vasudevaya Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, thank you all for coming. So from today, we will start unit number 20. It's Canto 4, chapters 29, 30, and 31. Today we will start Canto 4, chapter 29. I will share the overview slide to know where we are. So you will remember this overview slide for Canto 4. The highlighted in yellow, the bottom parts, unit 19 and 20 are where we are, so related units. Unit 20 is the leftover unit in this Canto 4. So Canto 4, chapter 29 is titled Talks Between Narada and King Prachinibari. Is divided into 8 parts. Part 1 is verses 1 to 25. Narada's elaboration on the allegorical story. Part 2, verses 26 to 33. Narada's direct description of material existence. Part 3, verses 34 to 41. Narada gives Bhakti as the solution. Part 4, verses 42 to 55. Narada ends Prachinabari's performance of rituals. Part 5, verses 56 to 59. Further questions by Prachinabari. Part 6, verses 60 to 79. Transmigration of the soul. part 7, verses 80 to 82, renunciation of King Prachinabharhi. Part 8, verses 83 to 85, Phala Shruti. So Prachinabharhi says to Srila Narad Muni that he did not understand the purport of Srila Narad Muni's words through the allegorical story of Puranjana. Therefore, in verses 2 to 24, here in this chapter 29, Srila Narad Muni explains the different characters in the allegory in the past 4 chapters. So, for us, this chapter 29 will be very much a recap of what we have discussed in the previous 4 chapters, because we did cover what Narad Muni is going to explain right now. So, what question arose to Prachinabharhi, because Prachinabharhi does not know what all these characters mean, but we did cover ahead of time to ensure we follow what Narad Muni is saying. Therefore, this chapter 29 at the start is literally going to be a recap of the previous 4 chapters. So I will have slides on the screen to connect the dots for the various characters. Now understand that some slides are for this chapter 29 and some slides are from previous chapters that Narad Muni is referring to while he is speaking verses in this chapter 29. So we'll start reading verses from chapter 29, and you will notice on the slides that I have on the screen that on the top left corner I have it in color what chapter, what verses are being referenced to. And other slides, the color will change because they are referring to previous chapter. Mother Jija will read chapter 29, verses 1, 2, and 3 translations.
Chapter 29, Text 1. Krishna King Prachinabharhi replied, "My dear Lord, we could not appreciate completely the purport of your allegorical story of King Puranjana. Actually, those who are perfect in spiritual knowledge can understand, but for us who are overly attached to fruitive activities to realize the purpose of the story is very difficult." Text 2. The great sage Narada Muni continued, "You must understand that Puranjana, the living entity, transmigrates according to his own work into different types of bodies, which may be one-legged, two-legged, three-legged, four-legged, many-legged, and simply legless. Transmigrating into these various types of bodies, the living entity as the so-called enjoyer is known as Puranjana." Text 3. The person I have described as unknown is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. the master and eternal friend of the living entity. Since the living entities cannot realize the supreme personality of Godhead by material names, activities, or qualities, he remains everlastingly unknown to the conditioned soul. Hare Krishna.
So you can follow the slides as we read through the verses that you see that character is Puranjana, is actually living entity, the Jiva is transmigrating, the city is the body, could be one-legged, two-legged, three-legged, many legs or no legs. And Avigyana is Supreme Lord. The Jiva cannot realize the Supreme Lord by material means. The Lord remains unknown. And we will continue reading the verses this way and follow the slides. Chandran Prabhu, 4 and 5 translations.
Hare Krishna. Text 4. When the living entity wants to enjoy the modes of material nature in their totality, he prefers, out of many bodily forms, to accept that body which has 9 gates, 2 hands, and 2 legs. Thus, he prefers to become a human being or a demigod. Text 5. The great sage Narada continued, the word pramada mentioned in this regard refers to material intelligence or ignorance. It is to be understood as such, when one takes shelter of this kind of intelligence, he identifies himself with the material body, influenced by the material consciousness of I and mind. He begins to enjoy and suffer through his senses. Thus, the living entity is entrapped. Text 6.
Hold on.
The 5.
So 9 gates refers to the body with the 9 openings and ends and legs. So the Jiva wants to enjoy. He considers human or demigod at the best to enjoy. Puranjani is material intelligence. Actually, it's ignorance. Material intelligence is ignorance. This produces the concept of I, me, mine. And the Jiva trying to enjoy the gunas actually gets entrapped within the body. Uncle will read 6 and 7 translations.
Hare Krishna. Text 6. The 5 working senses and 5 senses that acquire knowledge are all made friends of Puranjani. The living entity is assisted by these senses in acquiring knowledge and engaging in activity. The engagements of the senses are known as girlfriends, and the serpent, which was described as having 5 heads, is the life air acting within the 5 circulatory processes. Text 7. The 11th attendant, who is the commander of the others, is known as the mind. He is the leader of the senses both in the acquisition of knowledge and in the performance of work. The Panchala kingdom is that atmosphere in which the 5 senses objects are enjoyed. Within that Panchala kingdom is the city of the body, which has 9 gates. Hare Krishna.
Right, so male friends are the 10 senses, the instruments for enjoying in material world. Female friends are actions of the senses or the so many desires we have, such as tasting, hearing, smelling, etc. The serpent 5-headed hood is a life air. The 5 life air we have prana, apana, udana, vyana, and samana. Then the 11th attendant, who is the commander, is the mind. So both in acquisition of knowledge and performance of work. And Panchala states means the 5 objects, and within this kingdom is the body. I will fix the typo here, and then you can take a snapshot of this slide. So take a snapshot of this slide. It literally is a quick snapshot of the first set of verses that we just read. Questions, comments so far? All right. In verses 8 to 16, Shri Narad Muni describes the 9 gates, which was discussed in Canto 4, Chapter 25, verses 45 to 55. So follow along the slide. So you'll see I have it on the slide. So this is from Chapter 25, Canto 4, Chapter 25. Therefore, the left top box color is different. There's the 9 gates. So when we read through these verses here in Chapter 29, Narad Muni will refer all these Sanskrit words, and the chart will become handy as we read through these verses. Abhishek Prabhu, 8 and 9 translation.
Hare Krishna. Text 8. The eyes, nostrils, and ears are pairs of gates situated in one place. The mouth, genital, and rectum are also different gates. Being placed into a body having these 9 gates, the living entity acts externally in the material world and enjoys sense objects like form and taste. Text 9. 2 eyes, 2 nostrils, and a mouth, altogether 5, are situated in the front. The right ear is accepted as the southern gate, and the left ear is the northern gate. The 2 holes or gates situated in the west are known as the rectum and genital.
Abhishek will continue 10 and 11 translations.
Text 10. The 2 gates named Khadyota and Aviramukhi, which have been spoken of, are the 2 eyes side by side in one place. The town name Vibhrajita should be understood as form. In this way, the 2 eyes are always engaged in seeing different kinds of form. Text 11. The 2 doors named Nalini and Nalini should be known as the 2 nostrils, and the city named Saurabha represents aroma. The companion spoken of as Avadhuta is the sense of smell. The door called Mukhya is the mouth, and Vipana is the faculty of speech. Rasagna is the sense of taste.
So you see all these words that Narad Muni is using, they're all there on the slide and the meaning of all of them. So this was Narad Muni spoke all these verses in chapter 25. But Prachina Bhari doesn't understand because he doesn't know that Narad Muni is giving an allegorical story. So he's saying, what are you talking? And therefore Narad Muni is again referencing all the same terms from the previous chapter 25 here in chapter 29 verses, and explaining what exactly they are. Although we have already covered all of this, therefore I say chapter 29 is a recap for us. Everybody on the same page so far?
Yes, Prabhuji.
All right, Mother Chandra Aunty will read 12 and 13 translations.
Text 12. The city called Apana represents engagement of the tongue in speech, and Bahudana is the variety of footsteps. The right ear is called the gate of Pitruhu, and the left ear is called the gate of Devahu. Text 13. Narada Muni continued, the city spoken of all Dakshina Panchala represents the scriptures meant for directing pravitti, the process of sense enjoyment in fruitive activities. The other city named Uttara Panchala represent the scriptures meant for describing fruitive activities and increasing knowledge. The living entity receives different kinds of knowledge by means of 2 years, and some living entities are promoted to Pitraloka and some to Devaloka. All this is made possible by the 2 years. Hare Krishna.
So all these terms you already have on the screen. Narad Muni is just referring to all of them. Again, just to explain to Prachina Bari what Narad Muni has described in the previous 4 chapters. Mother Chandranti will continue 14, 15, 16 translations.
Text 14. The city called Gramaka, which is approached through the lower gates of Ashuri, the genital, is meant for sex, which is very pleasing to common men who are simply fools and rascals. The faculties of prosecution is called Durmata, and the rectum is called Nirti. Text 15. When is it said that Puranjana goes to Vaishala, it is meant that he goes to hell. He is accompanied by Lupaka, which is the working sense in the rectum. Formerly, I have also spoken to 2 blind associates. These associates should be understood to be the hands and legs. Being helped by the hands and legs, the living entity performs all kinds of work and moves hither and thither. Text 16. The word Antahapura refers to the heart. The word Vishusina means going everywhere, indicates the mind. Within the mind, the living entity enjoys the effects of the modes of material nature. These effects sometimes causes illusion, sometimes satisfaction, and sometimes jubilation.
So we are reading chapter 29. Literally, Narad Muni is referencing all these words that we have on the screen from chapter 25. Everybody, questions, comments, realizations? So the description of the body continues.
Vijay, I want to ask a small clarification. Prachna Bari, sir, itself is an allegorical name.
Not Prachini Bari. Puranjana is allegorical. Prachini
Okay,
Bari
sorry.
is the actual king.
Okay. You have answered what I wanted to ask.
Okay. So description of the body continues. So Uncle will read chapter 29, verse number 17, where it describes that intelligence creates the situation for Jiva in the wakeful and dream state. And this also was described in Canto 4, Chapter 25, verses 56 to 62. Uncle, Chapter 29, verse 17 translation.
Text, Hare Krishna, text 17. Formerly it was explained that the queen is one's intelligence. While one is awake or asleep, that intelligence creates different situations. Being influenced by contaminated intelligence, the living entity envisions something and simply imitates the actions and reactions of his intelligence. Hare Krishna.
So we have already discussed all of this before, and in verses 18 to 20 is the chariot body analogy. So again, you have a different slide on the screen. So I provided this slide to you earlier, that from chapter 26, verses 1, 2, and 3, the chariot body analogy, and Narad Muni in chapter 29, verses 18 to 20, is going to say, this is what I explained in chapter 26. This is what it actually means. So, Uncle, 18 to 20 translations, chapter 29.
Hare Krishna. Text 18 to 20. Narada Muni continued. What I refer to as the chariot was in actuality the body. The senses are the horses that pull the chariot as time passes, year after year. These horses run without obstruction, but in fact, they make no progress. Pious and impious activities are the two wheels of the chariot. The three modes of material nature are the chariot's flags. The five types of life here constitute the living entity's bondage, and the mind is considered to be the rope. Intelligence is the chariot driver. The heart is the sitting place in the chariot, and the dualities of life, such as pleasure and pain, are the knotting place. The seven elements are the coverings of the chariot, and the working senses are the five external processes. The 11 senses are the soldiers. Being engrossed in sense enjoyment, the living entity is seated on the chariot, hankers after fulfillment of his false desires, and runs after sense enjoyment, life after life. Hare Krishna.
Questions, comments, realization so far? Everybody sees how we are revising the previous 4 chapters.
In fact, Prabhuji, these narratives are further simplified than earlier what we in the beginning. Perhaps familiarity.
Yeah, you are correct.
Made easier.
Yeah, so we read all the verses, then we revised all these chapters. So definitely, we are not in the similar position as Prachini Bhari. So Prachini Bhari only heard those 4 chapters, and he goes, "What? I don't know that this is allegory. What exactly are you talking about?" But we all, before reading the previous 4 chapters, we clarified what exactly is going on with the allegory, so that we follow along what was going on. Uncle, everybody.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Go ahead, Prabhu.
Prachin Barhi and Prachin Barishad, are they like same names?
Yeah, they are same names.
And they're used interchangeably in the...
They are used interchangeably, referring to the same person.
Okay, thank you.
Prabhuji, this Prachina is a Sanskrit word, correct?
It's a name. I would call it Sanskrit. It's a name. It probably may have some Sanskrit meaning, but it's not mentioned anywhere.
Because
it's a name.
In Tamil, always they say Prachina means the issue or the problem. So the whole matter is a problem which is explained without offending anybody.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's possible. Like you are correlating a meaning from a different language could be possible, but here it's an actual name of the king. So the last comparison is the Chandavega attacking the Puranjana city. And again, I have the slide. So this was described in chapter 27, verses 13 and 14. Chandavega attacks Puranjana city. And in verses 20 to 24, Narad Muni is describing that Chandavegas attacks the city, means all these are attacking the body. Sridhar Prabhu, chapter 29, verses 20 to 24, are you able to read?
Yes, Prabhuji. 21 to 24. What was previously explained as Chandavega, powerful time, is covered by days and nights, named Gandharvas and Gandharvis. The body's lifespan is gradually reduced by the passage of days and nights, which number 360, text 22. What was described as Kalakanya should be understood as old age. No one wants to accept old age, but Yavaneshwara, Yavanaraja, who is death, accepts Jara, old age, as his sister. Text 23 to 25. The followers of Yavaneshwara, Yamaraja, are called the soldiers of death, and they are known as the various types of disturbances that pertain to the body and mind. Prajvara represents the two types of fever, extreme heat and extreme cold, typhoid and pneumonia. The living entity lying down within the body is disturbed by many tribulations pertaining to providence, to other living entities, and to his own body and mind. Despite all kinds of tribulations, the living entity, subjected to the necessities of the body, mind, and senses, and suffering from various types of disease, is carried away by many plans due to his lust to enjoy the world. Although transcendental to this material existence, the living entity, out of ignorance, accepts all these material miseries under the pretext of false egoism, I and mine. In this way, he lives for 100 years within this body.
Very good. Any questions, comments, realizations? So we'll go back to verse number 14 and we'll read the purport. In verse number 14, Prabhupada explains how do Sahajiyas view the sex life and how does Vrindavan rectify sinful persons. Sridhar Prabhu, chapter 29, verse 14, purport.
Hare Krishna. Purport. When the world becomes degraded, civilizations become demoniac, and for the common man, the rectum and the genitals are taken very seriously as the centers of all activity. Even in such a sacred place as Vrindavana, India, unintelligent men pass off this rectal and genital business as spiritual activity. Such people are called Sahajiya. According to their philosophy, through sexual indulgence, one can elevate oneself to the spiritual platform. From these verses of Srimad Bhagavatam, however, we understand that the desires for sexual satisfaction are meant for the arvak, the lowest among men. To rectify these rascals and fools is very difficult. After all, the sex desires of the common man are condemned in these verses. The word durmada means wrongly directed, and nirti means sinful activity. Although this clearly indicates that sex indulgence is abominable and misdirected, even from the ordinary point of view, the Sahajiyas nonetheless pass themselves off as devotees conducting spiritual activities. For this reason, Vrindavana is no longer visited by intelligent men. We are often asked why we have made our center in Vrindavana. From the external point of view, it can be concluded that Vrindavana has become degenerate due to these Sahajiya activities. Yet, from the spiritual point of view, Vrindavana is the only place where all these sinful persons can be rectified by means of taking birth in the forms of dogs, hawks, and monkeys. By living in Vrindavana as dog, hawk, or monkey, the living entity can be elevated to the spiritual platform in the next life. Hare Krishna.
So, Sahajiyas, um, they take the rectum and the genitals seriously and as if it is the center of all activity. Even at sacred places like Vrindavan, these less intelligent men, they take a rectal and genital business as spiritual activity. And they think their philosophy is that through sexual indulgence, they can elevate themselves to spiritual platform. These are lowest of men. And Prabhupada said it is very difficult to rectify these kinds of lowest people. So sex indulgence is abominable, is misdirected. But Sahajiyas consider themselves as devotees conducting spiritual activities. This is a misunderstanding, is incorrect. And Prabhupada says that somebody born in Vrindavan, even as a dog, hog, monkey, he can even get elevated to spiritual platform in the following life. Questions, comments, realizations? So now part 2 is verses 26 to 33. Narada's direct description of material existence. So these verses are also a summary where Narad Muni summarizes Jiva's wandering in the material world like a dog because of misuse of free will and because of association of the modes of material nature. Mother Jija will read 26 and 27, 28, 29, 4 verses translations.
Text 26. The living entity by nature has minute independence to choose his own good and bad fortune, but when he forgets his supreme master, the personality of Godhead, he gives himself up unto the modes of material nature. Being influenced by the modes of material nature, he identifies himself with the body, and for the interest of the body becomes attached to various activities. Sometimes he is under the influence of the mode of ignorance, sometimes the mode of passion, and sometimes the mode of goodness. The living entity thus gets different types of bodies under the modes of material nature. Text 28. Those who are situated in the mode of goodness act piously according to Vedic injunctions. Thus, they are elevated to the higher planetary systems where the demigods live. Those who are influenced by the mode of passion engage in various types of productive activities in the planetary systems where human beings live. Similarly, those influenced by the mode of darkness are subjected to various types of misery and live in the animal kingdom. Text 29. Covered by the mode of ignorance in material nature, the living entity is sometimes a male, sometimes a female, sometimes a eunuch, sometimes a human being, sometimes a demigod, sometimes a bird and an animal, and so on. In this way, he is wandering within the material world. His acceptance of different types of bodies is brought about by his activities under the influence of the modes of nature. Hare Krishna.
Right, so this is why Puranjana becomes a female in the next life in the allegorical story. Chandan Prabhu will read 30, 31, 32, 33 translations, 4 verses.
Hare Krishna. Text 30-31. The living entity is exactly like a dog who, overcome with hunger, goes from door to door for some food. According to his density, he sometimes receives punishment and is driven out, and at other times receives a little food to eat. Similarly, the living entity, being influenced by so many desires, wanders in different species of life according to destiny. Sometimes he is high and sometimes he is low. Sometimes he goes to the heavenly planets, sometimes to hell, sometimes to middle planets, and so on. Text 32. The living entities are trying to counteract different miserable conditions pertaining to providence. Other living entities are the body and mind. Still, they must remain conditioned by the laws of nature, despite all attempts to counter these laws. Text 33. A man may carry a burden on his head, and when he feels it to be too heavy, he sometimes gives relief to his head by putting the burden on his shoulder. In this way, he tries to relieve himself of the burden. However, whatever process he devises to counteract the burden does nothing. Burden does nothing more than put the same burden from one place to another.
So, Nadmuni is describing material existence. In verse number 33 purport, Srila Prabhupada cites an example of people in the material world trying to solve problems, but they end up only creating more problems. Chandan Prabhu, 33 purport.
Hare Krishna. Text 33 purport. This is good description of an attempt to transfer a burden from one place to another. When one gets tired of keeping a burden on his head, he will place it on his shoulder. This does not mean that he has become free from the strains of carrying the burden. Similarly, human society, in the name of civilization, is creating one kind of trouble to avoid another kind of trouble. In contemporary civilization, we see that there are many automobiles manufactured to carry us swiftly from one place to another. But at the same time, we have created other problems. We have to construct so many roads, and yet these roads are insufficient to cope with automobile congestion and traffic jams. There are also the problems of air pollution and fuel shortage. The conclusion is that the process we manufacture to counteract or minimize our distress do not actually put an end to our pains. It is all simply illusion. We simply place the burden from the head to the shoulder. The only real way we can minimize our problem is to surrender unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead and give ourselves up to His protection. The Lord, being all powerful, can make arrangements to mitigate our painful life in material existence. Hare Krishna.
So this is very practical. We have seen for ourselves that they construct new roads so often, and then they construct bridge on top of the road or tunnels under the roads, but it isn't solving anything. All they are doing is, Prabhupada describes that moving the burden from one part of the body to other. Say the burden was on the head and now they move it to the shoulder. But this does not mean they have become freed from the burden. And then Prabhupada describes the solution, that the real solution is to surrender to the Lord and do devotional service. So as long as we try to manufacture all these different solutions, it isn't really a solution. It's just is moving the burden from one part of the body, means from the head to another part of the body to the shoulder. It isn't solving. So we have to live a simple life, do devotional services. Then all this so-called modern civilization enhancements will not really be required. Questions, comments, realizations? So all these attempts of Jiva to counteract the threefold miseries are futile. The cause of suffering is sinful activity. Therefore, some may then suggest that doing a great sacrifice would atone for my sinful actions. So Srila Narad Muni nullifies this statement that sacrifice would atone sinful actions. Rather, Srila Narad Muni provides bhakti as the solution in the next part 3 verses. And then in part 4, Srila Narad Muni will stop Prachina Bhari's performance of rituals. He said, no, you don't need all this. These are futile efforts. So part 3 is verses 34 to 41. Narada gives bhakti as the solution. So Abhishek Prabhu will read 34 to 41 translations, where these verses describe that awakening Krishna consciousness, surrender to Krishna is the only remedy. And hearing Krishna Katha leads to seeing the Lord. Abhishek Prabhu, 34 to 41.
Hare Krishna. Text 34. Narada continued, O you who are free from all sinful activity, no one can counteract the effects of fruitive activity simply by manufacturing a different activity devoid of Krishna consciousness. All such activity is due to our ignorance. When we have a troublesome dream, we cannot relieve it with a troublesome hallucination. One can counteract a dream only by awakening. Similarly, our material existence is due to our ignorance and illusion. Unless we awaken to Krishna consciousness, we cannot be relieved of such dreams. For the ultimate solution to all problems, we must awaken to Krishna consciousness. Text 35. Sometimes we suffer because we see a tiger in a dream or a snake in a vision. But actually, there is neither a tiger nor a snake. Thus, we create some situation in a subtle form and suffer the consequences. These sufferings cannot be mitigated unless we are awakened from our dream. Text 36-37. The real interest of the living entity is to get out of the nescience that causes him to endure repeated birth and death. The only remedy is to surrender unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead through his representative. Unless one renders devotional service unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead Vasudev, one cannot possibly become completely detached from this material world, nor can he possibly manifest real knowledge. Text 38. O best of kings, one who is faithful, who is always hearing the glories of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is always engaged in the culture of Krishna consciousness and in hearing of the Lord's activities, very soon becomes eligible to see the Supreme Personality of Godhead face to face. Text 39 and 40. My dear king, in the place where pure devotees live, following the rules and regulations, and thus purely conscious and engaged with great eagerness in hearing and chanting the glories of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, in that place, if one gets a chance to hear their constant flow of nectar, which is exactly like the waves of a river, one will forget the necessities of life, namely hunger and thirst, and become immune to all kinds of fear, lamentation, and illusion. Text 41. Because the conditioned soul is always disturbed by bodily necessities such as hunger and thirst, he has very little time to cultivate attachment to hearing the nectarian words of the Supreme Personality of Godhead.
So in all these verses, Nad Muni is summarizing the solution that awaken Krishna consciousness, surrender to Krishna as the remedy. Hearing Krishna Katha is the remedy which leads to seeing the Lord. So in verse 40 purport describes the analogy that devotee is very eager to hear from the lips of liberated devotees. Abhishek Prabhu, 40 purport.
Text 40. The cultivation of Krishna consciousness is possible where great devotees live together and constantly engage in hearing and chanting the glories of the Lord. In a holy place like Vrindavan, there are many devotees constantly engaged in chanting and hearing the glories of the Lord. If one gets a chance to hear from pure devotees in such a place, allowing the constant flow of the river of nectar to come from the mouths of pure devotees, then the cultivation of Krishna consciousness becomes very easy. When one is engaged in constantly hearing the glories of the Lord, he certainly rises above the bodily conception. When one is in the bodily conception, he feels the pangs of hunger and thirst, fear, lamentation, and illusion. But when one is engaged in hearing and chanting the glories of the Lord, He transcends the bodily conception. The word Bhagavad Gunanu Bhagavad Gunanukathana Shravana Vyagra Chetasa, meaning always eager to find the place where glories of the Lord are being heard and chanted, is significant in the verse. A businessman is always very eager to go to a place where business is transacted. Similarly, a devotee is very eager to hear from the lips of liberated devotees. As soon as one hears the glories of the Lord from the liberated devotees, he immediately becomes impregnated with Krishna consciousness. This is also confirmed in another verse. Satam prasangan mama virya samvedo bhavanti hitkarna rasayana katha tajjoshanad ashwa apavarga vartmani shraddha ratir bhakti anukramishyati. In the association of pure devotees, discussion of the pastimes and activities of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is very pleasing and satisfying to the ear and to the heart. By cultivating such knowledge, one gradually becomes advanced on the path of liberation, and therefore he is freed and his attraction becomes fixed. Then real devotion and devotional service begin. Bhagavatam 3.25.25. In the association of pure devotees, one becomes attached to hearing and chanting the glories of the Lord. In this way, one can cultivate Krishna consciousness. And as soon as this cultivation is advanced, one can become faithful to the Lord, devoted to the Lord, and attached to the Lord. And thus, one can very quickly attain full Krishna consciousness. The secret of success in the cultivation of Krishna consciousness is hearing from the right person. A Krishna conscious person is never disturbed by the bodily necessities, namely eating, sleeping, mating, and defending.
Very nice recitation of the verses by Abhishek Prabhu in the proper meter. Very good, thank you. So we read that if one gets a chance to hear Krishna Katha from pure devotees, allowing that constant flow of the river of the nectar, then Krishna consciousness becomes easy and one rises above the bodily conception. So the devotee is always eager to find the place where the glories of the Lord are being heard and chanted, just as a businessman is always very eager to go to a place where business is transacted. Similarly, devotee is always eager to hear from the lips of liberated devotees. So without association of devotees, one cannot cultivate Krishna consciousness. So the word Niranjan Bhajan is explained again. We discussed in one of the previous chapters. So Niranjan Bhajan means cultivating Krishna consciousness in solitary place, and this actually is not possible for a neophyte because he'll be disturbed by bodily necessities of eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. Questions, comments, realizations?
Hare Krishna Prabhuji. Prabhuji, this point on hearing from liberated devotees, like, is it like it's like hearing from, like, when we don't have physical association, is uh, hearing from Srila Prabhupada the way to follow this principle, like,
You are
regularly?
absolutely correct. So there are two types of association. One is vapu, means when you are in physical proximity. And the other is vani, means you follow the instructions. So vapu means physical association is very difficult for all the time. You may not have. But if you follow the instructions all the time, then you are with Srila Prabhupada and your spiritual master all the time. So absolutely correct that you don't need to worry about wanting physical association of your spiritual master. Rather, try to simply hear, simply follow the instructions of your spiritual master, and then you will be always with your spiritual master. Now, to add to another point about this hearing, that how hearing is restoring our relationship. So we have actually discussed this in previous chapter. So Abhishek Prabhu will go to Canto 4, chapter 20, verse number 25. So 4, 20, 25. And read the translation, and I'll describe about the saffron dust particles follow through when you hear from a pure devotee. The pure devotees' words of Krishna Katha carry the saffron dust of the lotus feet of the Lord. Prabhu, 4:20-25.
Yes, Rudy. Srimad Bhagavatam 4.20.25 translation. My dear Lord, you are glorified by the selected verses uttered by great personalities. Such glorification of your lotus feet is just like saffron particles. When the transcendental vibration from the mouths of great devotees carries the aroma of the saffron dust of your lotus feet, the forgetful living entity gradually remembers his eternal relationship with you. Devotees thus gradually come to the right conclusion about the value of life. My dear Lord, I therefore do not need any other benediction, but the opportunity to hear from the mouth of your pure devotee.
Right, so this is Prithu Maharaj asking for benediction to hear from the mouths of pure devotees, because um, the saffron dust particles from the lotus feet of the Lord is mixed in the Krishna Katha uh, spoken by the pure devotees. So when this Krishna Katha spoken by pure devotees enters through our ears, then the saffron dust particles from the lotus feet of the Lord also enter through our ears to our heart, and this is how cleansing happens. So if we actually correlate from Canto 1, Chapter 2, verse where Srimad Bhagavatam is the process of hearing, where this same process is actually described. So from Canto 1, Chapter 2, verse 16 onwards is the process of how Bhagavatam cleanses. So 1.2.17 explains this cleansing process. So Abhishek Prabhu, go to Canto 1, Chapter 2, verse 17 is actually a key memorization verse. Can recite if you like in the translation, where the cleansing process is explained.
Yes, Guruji. Yes, Srimad Bhagavatam 1.2.17. Shinvatam Swakataha Krishna Punya Shravana Kirtanaha Hridayantastho hi abhadrani Vidinoti Sruhutsatam. Translation. Shri Krishna, the personality of Godhead, who is the Paramatma Supersoul in everyone's heart and the benefactor of the truthful devotee, cleanses desires for material enjoyment from the heart of the devotee who has develop the urge to hear his messages, which are in themselves virtuous when properly heard and chanted.
Right? Cleansing process. So we have connected so many dots from a simple discussion. Abhishek Prabhu, everybody, does that help you all?
Yes, Prabhu, thank you.
Yes,
Nice
Prabhuji.
narrative with appropriate voice.
Go ahead, Uncle. Now there was echo. Go repeat, please. Unmute.
Nice narrative with appropriate voice modulation by Abhishek Prabhu.
Yeah, he recites verses very, very nicely in the proper meter. Very good. Yeah, very good glorification of Abhishek Prabhu's recitation also. Cleansing process, Abhishek Prabhu is saying cleansing process also related to Chatur Shloki Bhagavad Gita. Yeah, you are correct. Krishna gives the instruction from within, Dadami Bhukti Yogam Tam, 10.10, by which the devotee comes to Krishna. Very good. Thank you. We have correlated so many verses. So this is the appropriate way to study Bhagavatam, right? So we are not here to just put a tick mark that I covered so many verses. No. We should remember, we should correlate. So, and we should reread. So my spiritual master just a couple days back gave a lecture on why we should assimilate. So you know how we all read the verses, then we go back and we revise. So some may say, well, what really is the point of doing all of this? So my spiritual master gave a lecture that why it is so important to understand and reread again and again. So if anybody is interested, you can get that lecture from me. And as part of the lecture, an additional point was provided with the example of a PhD student. That PhD student, how little they know. So I will bring up on screen these slides, and although the slides are about the PhD, that how little one knows even after doing PhD, and my Guru Maharaj then says, now replace this with Bhagavad Gita. So the slides that I'm about to bring on the screen is about how little the PhD knows. And then my Guru Maharaj says, now replace this with Bhagavad Gita that recognize how little we know. Therefore, we have to revise again and again. So I will run through these slides that how little we know. So he says that imagine there is a circle that contains all of human knowledge. And by the time we finish elementary school, you know there's a little dot in the circle. Then when you finish high school, you know a little more. So there is an additional circle of knowledge. Then when you get bachelor's degree, you gain in specialty. So you see there is that little bump standing out. So this is your specialty. And that specialty you further specialize in your master's degree. And then you do research on that specialty, you reach the edge of human knowledge. So once you reach the boundary, you focus on that one particular topic. So this is what the PhD students do, that they focus on one particular topic, and the slides zoom in that you push through the boundary for a few years until one day the boundary gives and you cross through that boundary. That dent that you created, that is PhD, right? So you went through so much laborious task to reach through that to that PhD level. You created that dent. So once you reach that PhD level where you have created this dent, so the world looks different to you because you have something that nobody else knows. And the next slide is amazing, which I just described, that now the world looks different because you have that additional dent. But you forget the bigger picture. There is so much more knowledge to assimilate on the spiritual path. We are missing out. And with these slides, then my spiritual master says, now replace all this topic for Bhagavad Gita. That even though you may be studying Bhagavad Gita again and again, you have to realize we know so very little. Exactly like the tiny dent that the PhD student may have encountered. Everybody on the same page? Questions, comments, realizations?
Prabhuji, would you please mention the reference which Abhishek Prabhu narrated the last one? Cleaning process. I read from
1 to 17. 1 to 17.
No, 1:17.
Correct. And if anybody is
Okay.
interested in getting the lecture of my spiritual master about why we should read and revise again and again,
Yes,
you
Prabhu.
can.
Yes,
Well,
Prabhuji.
Please send it.
Yes, Prabhuji, please send it.
All right. We'll do that.
This is very interesting. The date which is created, curvature.
Uncle, please mute one of the voice at your end and then speak.
It's not coming for me. Yeah.
Okay, Uncle, unmute and go ahead.
One I have closed. Is it okay now?
Yeah, go ahead.
The belt which created clearly indicate how much little you know and how much space is remaining to be filled
Correct.
by virtue of spiritual knowledge.
Yeah, so almost all of you did ask for my spiritual master's lecture on why should we assimilate Bhagavad Gita again and again. And in the lecture, my spiritual master also says, His Grace Chaitanya Das sends messages on Bhagavad Gita every day. So Chaitanya Das is thinking of Bhagavad Gita every day. Then he writes on one topic. We assemble once a week. And therefore, we keep forgetting. Therefore, we have to keep revising. So in batch 3 and 4, like how you all did the bigger presentation, one of the devotees' bigger presentation is going to be Bhagavad Gita, entire Bhagavad Gita, and he's going to present in 3 sessions. So 45 minutes, 45 minutes, 45 minutes for 6 chapters. You should all attend to revise. We need revisions again and again. Questions, comments, realizations? All right. Spiritual endeavor questions. Number 1. How do Sahajiyas view sex life? And how does Vrindavan rectify sinful persons? Comes from verse 14. What example, question 2 is, what example does Srila Prabhupada cite of trying to solve problems but actually creating more problems? Comes from verse 33. Third is an analogy from 4.29.40. A businessman is always very eager to go to a place where business is transacted. Similarly, a devotee is very eager to hear from the lips of liberated devotees. Last is for next class. Read Canto 4, rest of chapter 29 if you have not already read. I will share slides from the previous class on the striking points. There are 2 slides. Take a snapshot. Slide 1. And slide 2. So from these slides of previous class, I request all of you or some of you to revisit Niranjana Bhajan. Some couple of you had it incorrect. Some of you mentioned that Niranjana Bhajan means it's the last stage of spiritual master. No, the verse doesn't say that. The verse says that when a disciple is ready to preach, that's when the spiritual master should take up Niranjana Bhajan. Does not mean that's the last stage of spiritual master. Spiritual master can take up Niranjana Bhajan at any time. So revisit those striking points just to fine tune of what you wrote. So you can compare with your answer and see. There was one inquiry I will answer in our subsequent class. We are just past 1 p.m. Toronto time. Are we okay to stop here?
Yes, Prabhuji. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, everybody.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, everyone.